questions.
We have to do social distancing, so.
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
Sitting
So
next to
you
each
go
other.
down, way down there, and I'll stay here.
Right, we can't sit next to each other, I thought of that. We have
Well,
the
I think
social
there's
distance for
there's
you.
enough space in this briefing room that we can all have social distancing. I would like to point out that I've been doing social distancing all along since I'm always like far away from you guys. So if I'm sick, you're fine. Hopefully I'm not sick. All right. Good afternoon to the last hardy survivors of our press corps. First of all, I'd like to talk a bit about the one topic that's on everyone's lips, which is COVID-19. UN teams around the world are continuing to offer support to national and local authorities to prepare and respond to the pandemic. In Zimbabwe, upon the government's request, the UN team is supporting the most immediate preparedness needs, such as training of healthcare workers, while ensuring their own safety on caring for patients with COVID-19. The UN is also supporting the government with the school system's preparation, with posters for schools and leaflets, and for students to take home and share with families, while also preparing for potential homeschooling needs. The UN is also engaging with the private sector and civil society for a whole-of-society response to COVID-19. In parallel, the UN has also supported the government in developing a risk, communication, and community engagement preparedness readiness response plan, as well as public information material for distribution and display at health centers and other public places, including airports and other points of entry into Zimbabwe. In China, the UN team has been supporting national and local efforts to share information on COVID-19 through traditional and social media channels targeting various age groups and communities. These efforts have helped reach over 1 billion views on several social media channels. UN entities also translated COVID-19 preparedness messages in more than 40 languages and dialects tailored to the elderly or those in ethnic minority communities. On social media, the most prominent is the social distancing campaign jointly launched by the WHO and the resident coordinator, which has attracted over 51 million views and more than 540,000 people have participated in online discussions. A subsequent online survey conducted in early March indicated a 34% increase of people maintaining social distancing since the outbreak, and more than 90% of survey respondents correctly identified hand hygiene, respiratory etiquette, and social distancing as some of the top 4 WHO recommendations. And WHO, the World Health Organization, today called on member states in Southeast Asia to urgently scale up aggressive measures to combat COVID-19 as confirmed cases cross 480 with 8 deaths. 8 of the 11 countries in WHO's Southeast Asia region have confirmed cases of COVID-19, and the numbers of cases are increasing quickly. While this is an indication of an alert and effective surveillance, it also puts the spotlight on the need for more aggressive and whole-of-society efforts to prevent further spread of COVID-19, WHO said. We clearly need to do more and urgently. Our humanitarian colleagues tell us that some of the 140 countries affected by the COVID-19 pandemic are already in crisis due to conflicts, natural disasters, and climate change. They're home to millions of people who already need our emergency assistance. The UN and its humanitarian partners are determined that crucial life-saving work for the world's most vulnerable communities must be sustained. That means continuing focused coordination across the global humanitarian system, swift fundraising to ensure critical programs have the resources they need, and maintaining effective humanitarian operations, leaving no one behind. The World Health Organization has appealed for $675 million to fund the initial response to the COVID-19 pandemic. The Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs is currently working with WHO and other partners to coordinate a consolidated global humanitarian appeal. The Emergency Relief Coordinator, Mark Lowcock, has released $15 million from the UN's Central Emergency Response Fund to help fund WHO and UNICEF's efforts to contain the virus in vulnerable countries. Other OCHA-managed funds in individual countries are also stepping up, and country-based pooled funds have released money to scale up immediate preparedness in Afghanistan, Sudan, and Jordan. UN agencies and their partners are currently assessing where and how humanitarian operations on the ground are being disrupted to identify solutions as quickly as possible. At the same time, we're taking precautions to ensure the safety of staff and the people we serve. The UN Refugee Agency tells us that in Pakistan, following the closure of the Turkham and Chaman official border crossing points with Afghanistan, the voluntary repatriation of registered Afghan refugees in Pakistan has been suspended. This is due to the government's precautionary measures to mitigate the spread of COVID-19. Several UNHCR voluntary repatriation centers in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa and Baluchistan are closed until further notice. UNHCR said its utmost priority is to support global efforts on lessening the spread and impact of COVID-19 and to assist the government of Pakistan with its comprehensive preparedness and response plans. On a related note, the UN mission in Libya, UNSMIL, joins the call by international partners on all parties to the Libyan conflict to declare an immediate humanitarian cessation of hostilities, as well as a halt to the continuing transfer of all military equipment and personnel into Libya. That's in order to allow local authorities to rapidly respond to the unprecedented public health challenge posed by COVID-19. While UNSMIL continues its efforts in facilitating an inter-Libyan dialogue on the political, military, and economic tracks, the UN mission urges all parties in Libya to take the bold step in unifying their efforts in facing this pandemic. The UN continues to step up its cross-border response efforts out of Turkey to address the needs of hundreds of thousands of newly displaced women, children, and men in northwest Syria. Since the 1st of December, approximately 960,000 people have been newly displaced in Idlib and surrounding areas, mainly women and children. The mass displacement further increases needs across northwest Syria, where over 4 million people are living in severe conditions. Between the 1st and 16th of March, over 650 trucks carrying food, shelter material, water, sanitation, and hygiene and nutrition assistance have been sent into northwest Syria through the Bab al-Hawa and Bab al-Salam border crossings, as authorized by the Security Council. A detailed humanitarian readiness and response plan for northwest Syria has been in place since the end of January, covering both cross-border and delivery from within Syria, with an updated funding requirement of $500 million to assist over 1.1 million people in need. Over $300 million has been provided by donors towards this plan, but more is needed to fully address critical life-saving needs. Turning to the Central African Republic, you will have seen that we issued a statement last night where the Secretary General strongly condemned the attack perpetrated by anti-Balaka elements against local officials on the 15th of March in Grimari in the Ouaka prefecture. United Nations peacekeepers confronted the attackers and one Burundian peacekeeper was killed. The Secretary General also strongly condemned another attack on Sunday by suspected elements of two armed groups against a UN mission patrol on the Ndele-Barao axis. One peacekeeper from Pakistan was injured. The Secretary General emphasizes that attacks targeting United Nations peacekeepers may constitute a war crime under international law. And today, peacekeepers in the Central African Republic are continuing patrols in and around the city of Ndele, the area where the Pakistani Blue Helmet was injured on Sunday. The patrols are conducted in coordination with the country's gendarmerie to protect the population and prevent new clashes. In other news, today, the Secretary General's Special Representative for Children in Armed Conflict, Virginia Gamba, welcomed the recent adoption of a child protection code by the Central African Republic's National Assembly. The code criminalizes the recruitment and use of children, emphasizes that children associated with armed groups should be considered primarily as victims, and addresses other grave violations against boys and girls, such as sexual violence. The Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights said today that the recent sentencing of 8 senior members and one former senior leader of Tanzania's main opposition party on charges including sedition and unlawful assembly is further troubling evidence of the crackdown on dissent and the stifling of public freedoms in the country. The Human Rights Office says that the latest sentences highlight what appears to be an ongoing strategy by the government to use the criminal justice system to target its critics, imposing large fines or jail terms on opponents, journalists, and civil society figures. The Human Rights Office asked the government of Tanzania to abide by its international obligations, to respect human rights, including the right to freedom of peaceful assembly and association and freedom of expression. An estimated 50,000 stateless people in Uzbekistan are set to acquire citizenship following the passage of a new law in the country. A provision in the citizenship law signed by the Uzbek president last Friday will come into effect on the 1st of April, conferring citizenship to registered stateless people who were granted permanent residence in Uzbekistan before the 1st of January 1995. UNHCR, the UN Refugee Agency, welcomes the law and provided recommendations to national authorities during its drafting. the UN Economic Commission for Europe today launched a first regional report on progress towards the Sustainable Development Goals. The report looks at the change over recent years by reviewing 49 indicators across all 17 Sustainable Development Goals. The report found that countries in Europe are making good progress in targets like reducing extreme poverty, covering the population with social protection, providing modern means for family planning, and having low levels of maternal, infant, and child mortality. However, there's been slow progress in areas such as reducing pollution, protecting marine areas, development assistance, and disaster risk reduction strategies. You can find the full report online. And finally, some good news on this day. Thanks to Malta and its full payment to the UN's regular budget, we now have reached 72 contributions, and many thanks to Malta for that. And I just want to flag that now you can watch the noon briefing live from Twitter from the account at UNWebTV. This is in addition to the live streaming from our website. And that's it for me. Are there any questions? Yes.
Thank you, Farhan. And for all of my colleagues watching, wondering why I'm here, I'm still waiting to get my internet at home fixed so it's usable. I've already gotten some text messages. My questions are two. First, I know there is a major fundraising campaign going for coronavirus to help the WHO. Is the Secretary General thinking about doing any kind of other global fundraising to help all the people without the virus whose lives are totally impacted by this pandemic?
We are looking at further steps. We know that we will need more funding to deal with the pandemic. And we are working closely with UN member states and the private sector to ensure funding and equipment is available to fight COVID-19, both in member states and among the vulnerable communities, such as the refugees and displaced people we help. So there's a lot of expenses that will be coming, and we'll have to evaluate down the line what further steps are needed to get the funding we need. Obviously, we know at the same time that governments themselves will be facing economic hardships. There's going to be an economic impact of COVID-19 on many member states, and we're only now just beginning to understand the scale of that. So we know that money will be tight, but we are urging all countries to help pool what they can right now to get this pandemic stopped as quickly as possible, because obviously the economic benefits of solving this quicker rather than having it linger on in so many countries are almost incalculable.
And one other question on Libya. Is the acting SRSG making any efforts to try to get both sides to try and deal with the pandemic and the impact in the country?
Yes. You'll have seen the mission today was a part of a joint call by a large number of international groups to all of the parties, trying to get them to declare an immediate cessation of hostilities and also halt all the transfer of military equipment and personnel into Libya. So that's part and parcel of our efforts, while we still try to keep up with progress on the political, military, and financial tracks. Of course, as you know, the effects of COVID-19 make all of these efforts a little bit more complicated, including efforts to hold different conferences and gatherings in places like Geneva, as you can imagine. But at the same time, we are keeping up with our tracks. Stephanie Williams, who is the acting special representative at this time, is continuing with the efforts that were made by her predecessor, Hassan Salameh, and we're hoping that we can keep this up. Evelyn? Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Thank you for being here. I'm here because I'm expecting delivery of applications for the Dag Hammarskjöld Fund and whether for journalists, and we don't know if we can have a program this year, but we have to go through some motions and not let journalists, 100 journalists, sit in limbo. Okay, what's the web? Is it a website or a Twitter page that you're having that people are looking at to get information on the UN? What's the URL?
You can go to www.un.org/coronavirus, and there's up-to-date information on what we're doing. So in addition to the briefings that we've been putting out both here and from Geneva, there's one place where all of our efforts are being put up. And of course, you can also look at our news center site.
At the what?
At our normal news center site. But the coronavirus page has it all
Is there a Twitter page
in one place.
That you look at mostly, but that's all right.
There's also the Twitter page for the news center. And like I said, you can also we also have a new account, the @UNWebTV account, where you can also get the live stream, the live feed of these briefings from Twitter.
At UN what?
It's @UNWebTV.
Oh, yeah.
So-
Well, we know that one.
Yeah.
Now, how many people usually work in this building?
As Javier Perez de Cuellar used to
I
say,
remember
about half of them.
About half of them, yeah.
The serious answer is that there's normally around 3,000 people in this building, and sometimes on an average day about 1,000 visitors. As you know, the outside visitors, the tours, the bookshop, and so forth, those have been closed for the time being. Yeah. But today, for example, on the 4th of March, we had 11,033 swipes into the building. In other words, more than 11,000 times that different pass cards were swiped. So it's not the same thing as 11,000 people, of course. It'll be less than that. Today, the number of swipes into UN headquarters as of about 10:30 this morning was 489. So it's way down from 11,000.
Who's working? Is it peacekeeping, OCHA, people who have to keep track of conflicts around the world?
No, even different types of essential staff are working from home. The criterion is people whose actual presence in this building is required. We have a lot of facilities to allow people to conduct meetings remotely, to process all of the various forms and documents that we need remotely. So the work of the UN, whether it's writing reports, whether it's dealing with crises in different spots, many of those things still can be done remotely. But a determination is made on who has to be here. For example, I have to be here right now today just to talk to you, but the other members of the spokesperson's office are all still at work and patching in remotely, and we confer with each other and do our notes and our other work through email.
Do you go to morning meetings upstairs personally, and then who's still there? Yeah.
There's a handful of people at morning meetings, but many of our morning meetings, our established morning meetings, include people calling in through secure networks.
Right. So there's the whole peacekeeping staff is not here.
There will be some staff in each of the key departments who, but again, the main criterion about this is not how important your tasks are. The main criterion is, do your tasks require your presence in this building? And so that's how we're making that determination.
Don't they need that? They have maps and lights and satellites, and they can't do all that from home?
Maps and lights and satellites. A lot of the information from those can be accessed through different secure networks, and that's what we're trying to do for a lot of our staff. And if that's it,
one more question.
Okay.
Zimbabwe.
Yeah.
Who's doing that training? WHO or someone else?
This is the UN country team is helping support the government of Zimbabwe, again at the request. We've been providing daily updates about what different country teams are doing, and we'll keep trying to get those as we go along. But the staff of the country team is trying to do this support. Okay, have a good afternoon. All right.